My dad tried to force my stepsister into every part of my life. He crossed the line when he impersonated me, so I made sure he can't contact me again legally. My dad tried to force a fake sisterhood on me for 10 years, even using my identity to make it happen, and I finally made it stop, permanently. This whole nightmare started when I was 6 years old, and my parents got divorced. Within a year, my dad had remarried this woman, Sarah, who had a daughter named Ava, who was exactly my age, born just 3 months after me. From the very first day they moved in together, my dad and Sarah started pushing this narrative that Ava and I were sisters now, and that we needed to share everything like real sisters do. I remember being so confused because I already had a mom, and now suddenly I was supposed to pretend this random girl was my sister just because our parents decided to get married. But every time I tried to express that I didn't feel comfortable with this arrangement, or that I wanted my own space and my own things, I was immediately labeled as selfish or mean by both my dad and Sarah. They would constantly say things like, family comes first, and sisters need to support each other, and you're being so unfair to poor Ava, who just wants to be close to you. The worst part was how they forced us to share everything, and I mean everything. Our birthdays were 3 months apart, but they decided we should have joint birthday parties because it would be more fun as sisters. They made us share the same friend groups, enrolling us in all the same activities and clubs, and whenever I made a friend at school, they would immediately suggest that Ava should join whatever we were doing because sisters shouldn't leave each other out. They even tried to make us share clothes, which was particularly humiliating because Ava was bigger than me and nothing fit right, but they insisted it would help us bond and teach us about sharing. Any time I protested or said I wanted my own friends, my own birthday, my own activities, they would sit me down for these horrible lectures about how I was hurting Ava's feelings and how disappointed they were in my attitude. And my dad would get this look on his face like I had personally betrayed him by not embracing his new stepdaughter as enthusiastically as he wanted. The manipulation got worse as we got older because they started pushing Ava into my time with my mom too. My custody arrangement was supposed to be clear, weekends and holidays with my mom, weekdays with my dad, but somehow Ava kept showing up to things that were supposed to be just for me and my mom. When I had school events or sports games, my dad and Sarah would bring Ava and act like she belonged there, sitting with my mom and making everything awkward. They even started sending Ava to some of my activities during my mom's time, claiming it was easier for transportation, or that Ava really wanted to support her sister. And when my mom tried to object, they would accuse her of being petty and trying to exclude a child. It got so bad that I felt like I couldn't breathe, like every single space in my life had been invaded by this girl who I never asked to be related to, and no matter how much I protested, the adults in my life just kept pushing us together and acting like I was the problem for not being more welcoming. When I was 14, I finally convinced my mom to let me start seeing a therapist because I was feeling so overwhelmed and suffocated by this whole situation. I remember telling my counselor that I felt like I didn't have any identity of my own anymore, that everything in my life revolved around accommodating Ava and making her feel included, and that I was tired of being told I was selfish every time I wanted something that was just mine. The therapist was really helpful and started working with me on setting boundaries and advocating for myself, but when my dad found out what I was discussing in therapy, he completely lost it. He accused my mom of turning me against him and Sarah, said that therapy was filling my head with divisive ideas, and actually tried to petition the court for full custody, claiming that my mom was engaging in parental alienation by allowing me to express negative feelings about my stepfamily situation. The custody battle was terrifying because I was afraid the judge might actually believe my dad's version of events, where he painted himself as this devoted father who just wanted to create a loving blended family, while my mom was supposedly poisoning me against his new wife and stepdaughter. Thankfully, the judge saw through his manipulation, especially after I was allowed to speak privately with a court-appointed guardian ad litem who could see how distressed I was about the situation. The judge ruled that I could choose to live with my mom full-time, with only scheduled phone calls with my dad, and that was supposed to be the end of it. For a while, I thought I was finally free to be my own person without constantly having Ava forced into every aspect of my life. I was living with my mom, going to a different school, making my own friends, and starting to feel like I could actually breathe again. But my dad wasn't done with his manipulation, not even close. Even though I wasn't living with him anymore, he would use our scheduled phone calls to guilt trip me constantly, always bringing up how hurt Ava was that I had abandoned her, how she cried herself to sleep missing her sister, and how disappointed he was that I couldn't be the bigger person and maintain a relationship with her. He would send me these long text messages filled with photos of Ava looking sad, or screenshots of posts she had made on social media about missing her sister, and he would always end these messages with something about how family is supposed to stick together, and how I was breaking his heart by being so cold. The emotional manipulation was exhausting, but I was learning to ignore it with help from my therapist until my dad and Sarah started finding new ways to insert Ava into my life, even when I wasn't living with them. The first major incident happened during my junior year when my school guidance counselor called me into her office to discuss a tutoring opportunity. She explained that there was a student who was struggling in math and science, and since I had good grades in those subjects, they wondered if I would be interested in helping. When she told me the student's name was Ava, I was completely shocked and asked how she had ended up at my school, since I knew she lived in a different district. That's when I found out that my dad and Sarah had lied to the school administration, telling them that Ava was my sister and that she needed extra support, and they had somehow managed to get her enrolled in some kind of transfer program by using my address and claiming she lived with my mom and me. I had to have the most humiliating conversation with my guidance counselor and the principal, explaining that Ava was not actually my sister, that she didn't live with us, and that my dad and stepmother had apparently committed fraud to get her into my school, and then tried to use that to force me into a relationship with her through tutoring. The school was horrified and immediately reversed Ava's enrollment, but the damage to my reputation was already done because several teachers had been told we were sisters, and now I had to deal with awkward questions and explanations for weeks. Just when I thought that incident was behind me, something even worse happened during the summer before my senior year. I had applied for and been accepted to this really competitive leadership camp that was supposed to look great on college applications, and I was so excited because it was something I had earned entirely on my own merit, with no interference from my dad's side of the family. The camp was 3 hours away from home, and I was looking forward to a week where I could just be myself without any drama. You can imagine my absolute horror when I arrived at the camp and saw Ava getting out of my dad's car in the parking lot, wearing the same camp t-shirt as me. I immediately went to the camp directors to find out what was going on, and they explained that my sister had also applied and been accepted, and wasn't it wonderful that we would be able to experience this together as a family? I had to once again go through the mortifying process of explaining that Ava was not my sister, that I had no idea she had applied to the same camp, and that my father and stepmother had clearly orchestrated this to force us together. The camp directors were understanding and made sure we were in different groups and activities, but the whole experience was ruined for me because I spent the entire week on edge, worried that Ava or my dad would create some new drama or manipulation. After the camp incident, I thought surely my dad would realize he had gone too far and would finally back off, but instead things escalated even more. During the fall of my senior year, when I was stressed about college applications and trying to focus on my grades and extracurricular activities, I started getting emails from colleges and universities that I had never contacted. At first, I thought it was just normal marketing, but then I noticed that some of these emails referenced applications or inquiries that I had never made, and they mentioned information about me that was slightly wrong, like my address being listed as my dad's house instead of my mom's. The final straw came when I received a confirmation email for a college webinar that I had never signed up for, and when I looked at the details, I saw that both my name and Ava's name were listed as attendees, registered from an old email address that my dad and I had shared when I was younger, before my parents' divorce. I realized that my dad and Sarah were using this old email account to impersonate me, signing me up for college events and programs alongside Ava to continue their narrative that we were sisters who did everything together. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was identity theft and fraud, and they were potentially sabotaging my college prospects by creating a false digital trail that connected me to Ava in ways that could confuse admissions offices or scholarship committees. I immediately went to my mom and told her everything that had been happening, including the school enrollment fraud, the camp manipulation, and now this email impersonation scheme. My mom was absolutely furious and said we needed to take legal action to stop this behavior once and for all. We contacted a family lawyer who specialized in custody and fraud cases, and she was appalled by what my dad and stepmother had been doing. The lawyer explained that using someone else's identity to sign them up for programs without permission is a form of identity theft, and that the pattern of manipulation and boundary violation we described could be considered harassment. Within a week, our lawyer had drafted and sent a cease and desist letter to my dad and Sarah, demanding that they immediately stop using my name, impersonating me, or enrolling me in any programs without explicit written permission from my mom, who had legal custody of me. The letter also demanded that they stop contacting me directly and that all future communication go through the lawyer. But we didn't stop there. We also went back to court to request a modification of the custody order that would completely eliminate the required phone calls with my dad and would specifically prohibit him and Sarah from enrolling me in any activities, speaking on my behalf to any institutions, or forcing Ava into my educational or extracurricular activities. The judge was not happy when she heard about the escalating pattern of manipulation and fraud, especially the identity theft aspect, and she granted everything we requested. The new court order not only removed all requirements for me to maintain contact with my dad, but it also included specific language forbidding him and Sarah from representing themselves as my guardians to any school, camp, program, or organization, and prohibiting them from using my name or personal information for any purpose without explicit written permission from my mother. The court order also stated that any violation of these terms could result in contempt of court charges and potential criminal prosecution for identity theft. When my dad and Sarah received the legal documents, my dad tried calling my mom to argue and plead, claiming that he was just trying to maintain a relationship with his daughter and that we were being unreasonable and vindictive. But my mom stood firm and told him that he had brought this on himself by refusing to respect boundaries and by escalating to illegal behavior, and that if he had simply accepted my wishes to have some independence and space, none of this would have been necessary. The relief I felt after that court order was indescribable. For the first time in 10 years, I knew that I was truly free from the manipulation and forced relationships that had dominated my childhood and adolescence. I was finally able to focus on my senior year, my college applications, and planning for my future without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering how my dad and Sarah were going to try to insert Ava into my life next. I got accepted to my dream college, graduated valedictorian of my class, and started freshman year knowing that I had earned everything through my own efforts, without any interference or manipulation from people who refused to respect my autonomy. It's been 2 years now since that final court order, and I haven't spoken to my dad at all during that time. Sometimes I feel a little sad about it because I do have some good memories from when I was very young before he remarried and became so obsessed with forcing me to accept Ava as my sister. But I've come to realize that the dad I remember from early childhood was probably never as supportive of my individuality as I thought. He just didn't have another child to prioritize over me back then. The man who spent 10 years ignoring my boundaries, manipulating me, committing fraud, and prioritizing his stepdaughter's feelings over my well-being was showing me his true character, and I'm better off without that toxicity in my life. My therapist has helped me understand that what my dad did wasn't love, it was control, and it was more about his image of having the perfect blended family than it was about actually caring for my emotional needs or respecting me as an individual person. I'm thriving in college now, studying engineering, making genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than forced proximity, and building a life that's entirely my own. I know that some people might think I'm being too harsh, or that I should try to reconcile with my dad now that I'm older and more mature, but I honestly don't see the point in maintaining a relationship with someone who spent a decade showing me that his love was conditional on my willingness to pretend to be someone I'm not. The legal action wasn't about revenge. It was about protection, and it worked exactly as intended. I'm finally free to live my own life without constantly having to defend my boundaries or worry about what manipulative scheme is coming next, and that freedom is worth more than any relationship built on lies and coercion.